Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Telos Initiative. I'm Angelo Cole.
I'm Chris Vigil.
I'm Matt Mays.
Today, we are going to be talking about time.
And in preparation, we have watched all 13 billion seasons of Doctor Who.
All of it. Just now.
I've actually never seen Doctor Who. Doctor Who?
Doctor what?
Who's on first? No.
What's on second?
When are we going?
So,
Man, I wish we could go back in time and redo that intro. Alright, take us away, Angela.
So conventional.
So, I guess to start, perhaps we should go over what we mean by time, which on face value would seem pretty obvious, but for the materialists out there, time in a symbolic sense isn't just part of the fabric of reality. It's not just this
Construct?
Yeah, it's not just this construct moving you through a certain dimension. I know in physics, classical physics, there's 4 dimensions, 3 spatial dimensions, and time being the 4th dimension. But we're not just talking about time in the physical material sense here. We're talking about time as a means for enacting your will upon the world. Time as the symbolic representation of death. We could talk about time as it applies to you personally and empirically.
You know, I'm so fascinated when you say time as a means by which we enact our will. Mm-hmm. Something that we say, quote unquote, use or utilize, or that measure by which something changes, which I think is a really good way to think about time. And say, in the material sense, why do we keep time? Mm-hmm. Right? Because things are changing. Because a certain thing happens at 2 o'clock, certain thing happens at noon, and we need a way to be able to navigate and traverse what is going to happen between now and then. What is going to happen at that time? What's going to, what change is going to occur? Like, say we were just in a totally plain room, or a totally plain space, or purgatory, right? Where nothing changes, everything is just always the same. Why would you keep time? Why would you need time?
You could define time as the capacity for change. In and of itself. Mm-hmm. So time in relation to yourself and your will would be the thing that allows you to grow, the thing that allows you to suffer, the thing that allows you to fail and succeed. So time is almost like a double-edged sword. If we go into myth, one of the most cited mythological creatures representing time is the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. Mm-hmm. And usually you see it represented in a circle. Mm-hmm. Time, in a sense, is a devourer, but it even devours itself, in a sense. All of reality is subject to it. To some, time is the ultimate bottom, the ultimate meaning at the bottom of everything. Because it's your capacity for change, time is the thing that allows for meaning itself to even be present. Because if nothing changed, if nothing progressed or went down with the arrow of time, there would be no purpose, there would be no going towards anything. There would just be, I don't know. I don't even know if there would be anything, really, because time is so, it's hard to imagine a universe without time because it's so fundamental to our perception.
Well, you can't perceive anything that's really, not really like a stasis, right? If you're in stasis, time has stopped acting on you as a person. And within that field of time, right, so we're covering this, within the field of time you have change, suffering, and purpose. And I guess if there's suffering, there's also pleasure, right? So are we trying to balance these things, like change, suffering, pleasure, to attain our telos, our purpose? And I remember one of my mentors saying to me, like, at the end of your life, right, we're given a set amount of time. And at the end of your life, you have to look back and you have to be at peace with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, I guess it's about what you do with your given amount of time.
And there's also that phrase, memento mori.
Mm-hmm. Remember your death.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is, I believe it's the Stoics, but I might be mistaken. It
Correct.
might just be memento mori, meaning remember your death, so that you make use of your time in the present moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's as if, well, we could say it is as the inspiration, like passion and everything that spurs us forward, and everything that intercedes with space, that acts along the grains of time. Like time is a river, time is a stream, and now we see all these ebbs and flows from all the inspiration of all these events, or all these sources which intercede with time. And say we can use time as a baseline to measure things, but there are so many variables as well. Like someone could say such and such a thing takes the average person 5 years or so. Well, what if you're doing things that the average person wouldn't do? What if you have a momentum, a passion that gives you a velocity that the average person doesn't have? And now you are able to bring things about, like going back to your point about the will, being able to bring things about at a faster rate than that average person.
Mm-hmm.
So does that well, I wouldn't say that negates time, but it sort of bends time and space.
It's interesting to talk about the relationship between time and space, and I think that relationship goes all the way back to ancient myth. Really, if you think about one of the recurring topics that we keep popping up in our discussions is polarity. And if you think about the ancient mother and father, a lot of times it's something to do with the relationship of space and time. So you've probably heard of Father Time, and the opposing goddess to Father Time is Mother Earth. And Earth, I think, is a proxy for space. It's, to us, when we hear Earth, a lot of times our mind goes to the spherical planet orbiting the sun. But really, in ancient times, Earth meant more than just dirt or a planet. It meant the capacity to the place which you come from. The earth is where things come from. It's the horizontal plane, and time would be the vertical plane.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so those two are married mythologically. And when they come together in harmony, good things happen. If you can maintain a place across time for a certain amount of time, that is positive in the sense of life and work, symbolically. If you don't put in work, a space eventually succumbs to time and is eroded and molds and cracks and disappears ultimately.
Yeah, it can waste away. Like you could be spending 5 years building something, tilling the fields, planting your crops, and being able to enjoy the harvest later on, or you could sit on the couch. And what happens then?
You could even think of it like order and chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where order is the amount of work, or if you look at space as like an order, I like to think of it like space is represented by a square, geometrically, because squares stack easily. There's 4 corners to the earth, mythologically, which traditionally I think represents space, and space is the thing that you try to build on top of to create order. And time is the chaos. Time is the circle, symbolically. It's the self-eating snake. It's the wavy currents of the ocean that erode the square structure of order and space.
I like the that symbol of the, how do you pronounce it? The Aurora...
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros. I mean, if you think of the head of the snake, and I drew it here, so if you have, like, the head of the snake as, like, a point on an arrow, and then the body, right, slithers back into its own mouth, it's an arrow in a circle.
Oh.
Right? That's time. Reverting back in on itself. And if that's chaos, right, I can't remember if it's the Vedics or the Buddhists who have moksha. I want to say it's the Buddhists.
Moksha sounds Buddhist.
The Buddhist philosophy. That moksha is the freedom out of the chaos, right? That transcending time.
Out of karma, breaking your karma.
Or
Right.
Samsara, I think, is Samsara the Hindu word for moksha, or is that the cycle of rebirth and death?
We should probably do
I think that's the cycle of rebirth.
So
and death.
Samsara is
Yeah.
the opposing force to moksha. Moksha is breaking free from samsara. Then.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Okay, so if time is samsara, right, the eternal cycle that returns to itself, like the seasons come back every year, the
Right.
year returns,
Right.
and then turn, right? Like the clock's turning and is continuously going. Are we searching for a way to transcend out of the time reality? I mean, all of our
ultimately.
work and all of our change, right? Work, right? Work is energy and time.
Work is putting a lot of energy in order to preserve something across time, right?
Okay. So is all that work building up to transcend reality? I feel like that's where we're going with this, like, because you're right, we keep returning to the topic of polarity and unity. So here we are within the realm of time, experiencing all this change, suffering, pleasure, trying to attain our purpose, transcending into a unity.
Well, you're going into territory. A lot of spiritualists grapple with this. It's like, is the point to so, like, yeah, transcend and say master this reality and master your being within it in order to pass on. You also make me think of the bodhisattva in Buddhism, which is a person who has attained that place, been able to reach nirvana and enlightenment, but instead stays back through compassion to help deliver souls to that place, to be able to help others to reach nirvana, rather than simply moving on and like getting out of the game.
Okay.
So, but I think where a lot of them, unfortunately, go wrong is, well, if you're trying to be so, how's the best way to put it? There's a ground, like, you can't bypass the physical reality or the substantial material reality, thinking like the point is just to move on without doing it. Like, there's definitely a fair amount of, like, why we're here on Earth, and to master our reality on Earth. And it's an up and down, like Carl Jung really had it right with the, like, you can't have your tree reach heaven without the roots descending into hell. Like, it's
right.
It's an up and down situation.
Right.
It's, so again, polarity, right?
Okay.
So I like your concept of time as an arrow, and it made me think about words and etymology, and how throwing is used as a metaphor for a lot of things that we do. Even the word subject, the end of the word that's ject there means to throw. So a subject is the thing beneath the throw or behind the throw. The object is the thing thrown at. To reject is to throw again or to take back your throw. Maybe that's how it's better.
Throw back.
Yeah. Interject. You know, there's a lot of words that have to do with aim.
To throw
and
between.
Throwing.
Right.
Even our description of reality has to do with aiming your line of sight. It has to do with choices and decisions across time. So I think an arrow is very fitting. A lot of people talk about time as the arrow of time. It only travels in one direction.
You said the word that describes our reality ends in "ject" somehow? Do you mean...
I just meant that's something that came to mind when thinking about arrows and the arrow of time, is this notion of aiming and throwing. And it's built into our language.
Right. I think the term, like the word reality, is so fun because you can kind of tack it onto everything. Like, this is physical reality, right? But we can call it objective reality.
Oh, there you go.
We're projecting through time, through this objective reality.
Objective meaning the thing outside of yourself that you're aiming at. When something's objective, or you have an objective, you are aiming. When something's subjective, it's about the subject, the thing behind the aim.
And then that's a whole. Oh, go ahead. I was saying that's a whole another subject as well, like our subjective reality and objectivity. Now, it seems people can get locked into one side or the other, right? Like, there's even the idea that all that we see as we see it is reality, like the extent of what we can understand, or the extent of how far we can project. But
there's another one.
Project, right? But sadly it's a really limited mentality. But I can see where that comes from, though, because we want to think of ourselves as being in tune with reality. We want to think of ourselves as, well, hopefully, as being in tune with truth. And we could say that truth is in tune with objectivity, but but it also changes. Things can also things change. Things change all the time.
Right.
Right. So we're constantly in pursuit of it, and I think that's a really honest mentality too. Like when someone says, like, "Oh, I have the truth," or "I am so totally in truth," like, watch out for that person. You know, it's much more humble to say that I am
pursuing
truth, because now you're admitting you're on a journey, and you're admitting you're earnest in your intentions, and you could be wrong, you know?
Right?
And which isn't a knock on your intellect. It's just an admission that's true of pretty much all of us, is that we can be wrong. But if we can admit that, we can then adjust.
And I do think it's important to note that there is a difference between intelligence and wisdom. You can be very intelligent but going down the wrong path. It doesn't mean that you're stupid to fail. In fact, it's the wisest people fail multiple times, right? There's that famous quote by, Thomas Edison, where he says, "I haven't failed 100 times at creating a light bulb. I found 100 ways to not make a light bulb." But there's wisdom in that. That's why we like that quote. We use that quote a lot, because, hey, to fail and in honest pursuit and to grow from it, there's wisdom there.
So if I want my my wisdom tree branches to reach up into the highest parts of heaven, how badly do I have to mess up? Like, how bad do my mistakes have to be? Do I have to make any mistakes to have that level of wisdom? Or maybe, since I have made those mistakes, am I morally obligated now to pursue wisdom to a higher degree?
I think when it comes to wisdom, there's infinite ways to mess up, but there's really few ways to do it right. At least that's the way I see it. I could be wrong.
Well, they can rhyme a lot of these ways too. Like, say this person took this approach and this person took this approach, but there are a lot of similarities in between. And to think of, like, you have your personal experience, like you actually going through it and knocking your head against the thing, and hopefully taking hints from that experience and going like, oh, well, that was stupid, but what can I do better next time? Or if we're talking about, like, I'm going to sound like such a bro here, but if we want like a time hack, right? Learning from the experience and wisdom of other people who have made mistakes.
Oh, right.
Other people who have done what you're trying to do in the past, and you can say, this is where I'm going. Like, it's good to know your aim, or at least know where you are, give them some sense of orientation, and then they could say, like, dude, I did it. Like, I wish they could even say, like, man, I wish I didn't waste 5 years doing this and that and the other, whatever. It's when I could have just done this.
If only I could go back, right? In time.
Oh, man.
So them being able to impart that to you, you now don't have to waste those 5 whatever years that they did doing whatever activity that they did that didn't give them any gains, and you can actually you can compound your progress just by knowing that and applying that.
Right, which brings to light the notion of collective wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can attain some wisdom and intellect and experience all on your own without anybody's help. But if you take from the collective wisdom of your ancestors, or from a group of people that are on the right path, or a community, that can take you further than you could ever get on your own.
No doubt.
I wanted to bring up this notion of the idea that I think there's sort of 2 camps when it comes to time. There's the time is an illusion camp, and then there's the time leads to an ultimate eschatology or ultimate purpose camp. So the time is an illusion camp looks at time as just this happenstance property of reality. Perhaps it's ultimately just leads to suffering. Even our notion of death in and of itself is suffering, because there's no such thing as division or separation. And when you have this notion that time isn't real and it's just here as something to just maybe keep us entertained, or some absurd property of the universe, the effect that has on your will and your ability to move towards purpose is that you begin to think that there is no such thing as telos or purpose. If there's no time, and if there's no meaning behind everything, then this is all just for play. This is all just for show. On the other hand, maybe the people with the eschatological view could say time is ultimately leading us towards an ultimate end, not just for us individually in our death, but collectively the universe will come to a finality. And which direction that takes depends on your will, and your will matters, and your choices matter. Mm-hmm. It could either go into this meaningless return to its source where no progress has been gained and it's ultimately just a big circle, or we could come out on the other side with some sort of progress, some sort of ultimate thing is obtained, some sort of moksha or enlightenment or heaven.
It's like they have two pieces
Mm-hmm.
of the puzzle that you can only really see from the, going back to the pendulum, these extremes at either end. Like if you're in the time doesn't exist camp, you're freeing yourself from concern about time's passage.
Right.
And you're not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. You're not distracted by the anxiety about the future, or being
True.
trapped in the past. You're in the right place to be present. Mm-hmm. But what does that mean? It's like one of those statements like everything is connected, like true, but have you done your homework? Right? Do you know what that actually means? So on the other end of the spectrum, where time is leading towards something, like there is a purpose in the directionality of time, if you were to intersect that with the mindset of being in the present moment right now you have an energy, you have an infusion that happens within that present moment. Like, I don't know if you ever experienced any time like this in your life where you've had a realization, something that's so meaningful, like that it has that time seems to bend around that space in your life. Like, it's so important, and it's so activating and so charging, right? Mm-hmm. That you can't help but be in tune with what it is, and to move towards and to embody it. There's something activating about that, like those two parts coming together in this really, really beautiful synchronicity.
There you go.
While being synchronous.
Young, right, we're now getting into Carl Jung and synchronicity.
Right. But that's another thing. Like things seem to line up in very mysterious ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely feel like that is something I relate to my own experience, and the hard thing is it's hard to prove empirically. You kind of just have to trust the person in what they say and what they feel. If they're talking about something like synchronicity, like oh, I just feel like the stars aligned for this thing, I feel like something's out there helping me out, whether it's karma or God or whatever you attribute it to. And someone who's very skeptical or very reductionist is going to say, now wait a second, isn't that just coincidence? How do you know that there is anything? Are you just connecting the dots that aren't actually there? Or is there really something to this feeling of a deeper being in tune with the universe? There's also another word I wanted to bring up that relates more to the Christian tradition, and that's the word kairos. Kairos is a special moment in time, similar to synchronicity, where you feel ultimately connected with truth and God. And
well, real quick, just for our listeners, and it's already way too late because we've been talking about this, and plus we brought it up on episode 1, I think, or maybe episode 2. But eschaton is just a fancy word that means the end of time. Like the end of the word.
Mm-hmm. Sorry for throwing out weird words and not explaining myself if you don't know. But hey, maybe if you have the will to pursue knowledge.
If you have a smartphone, you can just look up the word eschaton.
Eschaton or eschatology, I think, is the word that I use.
Google has all the answers.
Yeah, it just means the ultimate culmination of time. Ultimate meaning universal end of everything. Sort of like Revelation in the Bible is an eschatological framework.
I'm also not sure if your initial question, like this whole illusion of time versus eschatology is really correct. I mean, I wouldn't call the illusion of time the loss of purpose or the loss of telos. I would call that something else. I wouldn't call it the illusion of time.
Okay.
Necessarily.
Let me press you on that. If you lose time as the capacity for change, how do you maintain purpose when you have no progress?
Well, time is affecting our cognition in a continuous manner. Mm-hmm. I don't think that I might be an individual, right, who rejects the idea of an ultimate purpose for my time and the change that I experience. That doesn't mean that I think time as this thing that's acting on me is an illusion. Because the seasons change. I change. Things about my life change. That's not an illusion, even if I don't think it has an ultimate end.
I think...
I would just rephrase it as something else versus eschatology.
I think that mindset may have come about from Alan Watts as well. He was a philosopher in the 70s. He used to say that quite a bit, and there is some wisdom where he said it's great. Well, he presented a lot of great and useful and interesting ways to think about reality in a very Zen-like manner. But he did used to say that a lot, like time doesn't exist, which I think, if I were to revise that, like time exists but might not matter as much as we think it does, or have as much effect or sway on things. Like it's not an absolute, right? So we can intercede in it, and the course of events and the speed of events can change, but time exists.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, in this reality, in the way that we experience this, we'll say, material reality.
I've found myself in both camps at different points in my life, and when you are in the time is ultimately an illusion camp, I think you are still. You do still think of time as existing and as a property, but the reason you would call it an illusion is because ultimately it doesn't matter. It has no bearing on you and your life. And there's a liberation there to thinking of time as an illusion, because if ultimately you don't have to worry about anything outside of the present moment, and really all you're suffering is just this epiphenomenal thing that you've built up in your head, then really you have everything you need. There's no use or utility in
caring for others.
Growth, change. Like why do all this extra work if you can just in your own head, bing, I'm enlightened. I'm here. I have everything I've always needed since the moment I was born. And the other camp would look at that and say, well, you're flaccid. You are unable to pursue your purpose, and you're incapacitated is probably a better word.
Gotta hit him right in the dick there, Angelo.
Rude. So rude.
Dude, we just lost so many listeners just now.
They were like, come on, man.
Look down, they're like, I am not, man.
You're hitting me in the manhood.
Oh, man. Too funny.
No, but I mean, someone who believes in ultimate purpose and believes in something objective to aim at would look at someone who's in the be here now, time is an illusion camp and say, hey man, you're not really trying. You're not reaching your potential.
So
and the other person would look at the ultimate purpose eschatological framework and say, you're silly. Why would you do all this extra stuff for nothing. It doesn't matter. And you're a fool for trying so hard when you could just be happy. So, if that's your goal.
Yeah. The illusion versus eschaton, that's a little bit like nothing matters versus maybe everything matters.
Ah, yeah.
And kairos, right? On God's time.
Right, God's time. That's a good way to put it.
Maybe that's somewhere in the middle. I would think that God's time is somewhere in the middle. It's not that nothing matters. Not everything matters, but you need to do what you can. You have a state in life.
Yeah.
Operate with me in a confluent relationship, and let's affect reality together.
Yeah. Some things matter more than others.
There we go. That? Okay.
There's a hierarchy there.
You have to be able to, well, if everything mattered, right, how could we possibly prioritize things?
Right. Even if you take it down to the fundamental idea of what you look at, what you choose to look at and choose to focus on, even physically with your eye, you're going to have to choose one thing over another. You're going to have to say, this is more important for me to look at in this moment than this. And it ultimately depends on your framework, on what you think is ultimate purpose, or what you think is.
So let's talk about bending the time-space continuum.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right. So
time hack again.
So let's say I'm a person and I have my priorities mixed up, and I'm doing hard drugs, and it's affecting my life negatively. It's affecting my friends and my family negatively. It's killing my body because my priorities are not correct.
Okay.
Now,
for you to even be able to say your priorities are not correct, you need to have a more objective value hierarchy. You have to be able to presume that health is more pertinent and valuable than drugs.
Well, let's say at the time, right, I didn't have that, right, because in that time and space, I was a drug user and doing this, that, and the other. And then in the future, I realized wisdom somehow.
Okay.
So now I'm on the right path, right, working my way, using my time to better myself. And I have memories of myself back then. And I ask, so really where I'm going with this, right, is I'm going to ask you guys, and you don't have to answer, it's kind of rhetorical, but how's your prayer life? Because I look back on my life sometimes and I'm like, man, when I was in my 20s, I did some bad stuff that set me in the wrong direction, and I asked God to pour His grace into me, into these memories of myself, hopefully healing myself from that time, and I have to recollect myself.
I definitely went off the well-beaten path for a while and did some bad things in my life as well, but I definitely feel like all of those helped shape me into who I am today. I don't necessarily regret a lot of that stuff that I did, because everything had a lesson in and of itself, and if I hadn't learned that lesson in that way, perhaps I wouldn't have gained the wisdom that I have now.
Well, again, I think that begs the question I asked earlier. If I want my branches to reach up into the 9th circle of heaven, do I have to, or the 7th circle, wherever God is, do I have to, have my roots down into the 9th circle of hell?
I think it depends on how well you can. By the way, you guys are so inspiring me. I got stuff
for sure.
How well / how quickly you can learn from those mistakes too, because say you could go through a mistake that you could learn from that one. You could get that knock on the head and be like, oh, you know what, I shouldn't have been going this way. I should go this way. But the more that you continue, down that path. It's like you'll just get the same lesson beaten in even harder, right? It's like reality is like hard, like beating at your door, like, dude, wake up, And then is it going to take you the first or second or third, fourth, fifth time hearing the same lesson to get yourself back on, to get yourself actually going in the right direction? That's a wonderful demonstration I've heard of. Alex Hormozy, he's an entrepreneur, very, very smart guy, also very philosophical, defines at least one quality of intelligence that way: how quickly you're able to incorporate knowledge, like how well you're able to incorporate and apply knowledge, right? So say if inversely, if we're just doing the same thing over and over again and the body's deteriorating and things are not going well, it's like, well, it's not very intelligent. But it could just take a number of times experiencing that lesson relatively over and over, and then on the other side of that, you can then say to someone in the future, like, well, again, back to the example of like the mentor, man, I wish I didn't spend all that time doing all this stuff when I could have just done this, right? And then you can, if that person applies it, they can then actually learn faster than you, which is great. You can help that person to learn even faster than however fast you learned, right?
Yeah, which brings us back to wisdom, right? And collective wisdom. And I know there's some subjectivists out there that are like, well, all of those things that you're talking about, all of those higher values are really presuppositions, because ultimately it's just based on humans trying to figure out purpose in this silly, meaningless show. And you could say, going back to the drug addict example that we were talking about earlier, you could say, hey, maybe there is something to the pleasure of drugs, and if that's what he wants to do with his life and puts that above his own health, that's his life choice. And if he has an overdose on heroin or something that's really pleasurable to him, perhaps for him that was the happiest life he could lead. To that mindset, I would probably say there is a sense in which we can find truths on a more universal level. I think when you divide everyone up into individuals and say that we're all in little islands in our own head, and we all are kind of making up our own morals and value hierarchies as we go around, you're cutting everyone off from this deeper source of wisdom, this deeper well of collective truth that people have discovered over periods and periods of time. And I think there is something to the sense that there have been very both wise and intelligent people across time. And if you are able to listen to some of those things that those people discovered and incorporate those into yourself, you will be in a better place on all levels, objectively, than you would be if you really have the mindset that cuts you off, the flaccid mindset.
What if it is that there are times for either one too? Now let me go further into that.
That's interesting, actually.
Like say, in terms of, I love thinking in terms of the archetypes, right? For those who aren't familiar, like lover, warrior, magician, sovereign, right? So the warrior is very concerned with doing, the carrying out of action, right? And we could even say, in terms of how far you throw out the carrot, the warrior is like, let me throw out that damn thing across the mountain and scale the mountain and do the great things, right? And the lover is like a tension opposite normally. It's like, let me enjoy the pleasures, let me enjoy the here and now, the beingness, the aesthetics. And you can actually pair both of those together, right? And you could say with the lover, it's like, let me just enjoy the carrot right now in this present moment.
Hey,
right?
I actually like that.
So say you have an aim though that really, like, you have a vision that really compels you. Your love is in tune with that vision, right? And so you're throwing that carrot out across that mountain, and you're like, I'm overjoyed at the vision of going across that mountain, right, and doing the thing. And you could say, there's the thing of, well, you get the accomplishment, you build it up, and all this stuff, and it lasts like 7 seconds. I think that can be true. I don't think that's necessarily true for something that really inspires and delights you. Something that when you get that, you're like, it's that payoff of moment of like, fuck yeah, that was amazing, and you carry that in memory, and that expands you, right? But going back to the times for each one, say you're the warrior, you're always throwing that carrot out. Say you're always throwing out that quest and going across from mountain to mountain to mountain to mountain to mountain. When do you get to rest? When do you get to rejuvenate yourself and just say, like, man, I've just I just want to be here right now. I just want to enjoy the sweet things and the fountains and the trees and the leaves, and and then when there's a time for the quest, then you go and quest, but you have your rest stops, and you rejuvenate yourself.
Wow, that's actually really good, a really wise insight. Because, I never really considered that perhaps it's not one or the other mindset, but perhaps both have utility at different points in time throughout your life. And you're right, if you're the sort of person that's the warrior all the time, you're just constantly going and going and going.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
I was in that mindset because of us growing up in Christianity. There's that whole, you're a knight, part of a kingdom, and you're constantly fighting this spiritual battle. And then I realized I can't constantly fight anything. I'm tired after one day.
You need a bell.
Yeah. And then I realized, because I am a Christian, that it's not that I'm fighting. It's that I show up to the battlefield with Christ, and the Savior fights for me. And suddenly I am less exhausted.
I also like your notion of combining the two, because if you can find something that you're passionate about for yourself and make it work to the extent that you're a warrior for that thing, it's like they will both carry you to a better place instead of being opposing views.
I'm going to say two things, just that I think maybe we should have an episode devoted to those 4 archetypes: the king, warrior, magician.
Oh God, I would love that.
That's Matt's
that's my jam.
Forte.
That's
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's thank you. I would love that.
But having I would say that the priest, or I'm sorry, the in your ideology, that's the magician. The magician has a sort of past presence. The warrior and the lover have a present presence, and the sovereign, the king, he has a future. Like, he's out looking for his kingdom.
Yeah,
he has a vision. And then that's like a power of 3, right? Like, there's a healing past.
Oh, yeah, there is a trinity there.
There's a healing past mindfulness, a here and now mindfulness, and a future purpose mindfulness.
Yeah, and they can each work with each other too. Like that, you could say that this is a capacity of the sovereign. Is this, when I started my men's work, the guy who led that, he put this beautifully. It invites all parts of you to the table. right? So you have the warrior, the lover, and the magician all around this table, right? And it's the capacity for them to work with each other. Like, say, you know, you have the inflation of the magician, and that's like the cynical, the bitter, the very intense one, right? Could use the softening of the lover to bring it back to center. By the opposite token, you could have the one that's ignorant, the magician that's like ignorant, its head in the sand, and it's not going out and working towards this purpose, right? It could use the activating energy of the warrior in order to say, like, hey man, you need to stop with your head in the sand. You need to pay attention. Hopefully in a way that person will receive, right? But sometimes that person just needs to like just hear it, like, in a way that that they'll actually listen to, which the magician in the center will know the words to say.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have to do a. What do you call them? The 4 archetypes.
4 archetypes, yeah.
Because I know there's other archetypes.
So they're not Jung's archetypes.
Oh, okay,
it's based on a book by Robert Moore.
Moore and Gillette.
Well, it's Moore and Gillette, and it's titled "King, Warrior, Magician, Lover: The 4 Archetypes of the Male Psychology."
Awesome. Maybe that'll be our next one.
Manliness.
Please.
In due time.
In due time.
Do you want to get back to synchronicity? Because I think we started on that, but we glossed over it for some reason.
Not too strong with synchronicity, but
are you familiar with synchronicity?
Yeah, tell me what you got.
I know that sometimes it emerges in a more concrete form. Some people, they feel like they see numbers, for instance. They might say, 1111 just keeps popping up all the time. And they don't know why, but they feel like there's a hidden message in there. And hey, sometimes things like that actually do come with a message and can change your life. And you can say, hey, I saw this number. Who knows? Maybe it actually was a coincidence, but because that number appeared and I associate that number with this thing, it helped me spark this idea and do this thing for the better and changed my life.
Can I give you an example?
Sure.
Because there's just so much use of the word, and like you said, people who can write it off as well. Did you think about this or that? And all of a sudden they're like picking it apart. I think it has to be something that you couldn't explain with a rational definition, right? So say, this was one of mine, is when I was creating my previous series, The Edge of Myth, which is a 7-part spiritual and psychological journey featuring different archetypes, different parts of the world. And I was working on the Ganesh piece. And I'll always lay out the composition at the beginning. In fact, that's my favorite part. I'll just say that's my favorite part of creating a piece is the composition, like being able to lead the eye and like the infusing the symbols into the artwork and really composing it in the way that I want, right? And I'll do a fair amount of research while I'm doing this, right? So I start painting it. I start a lot of progress on it, and then, as I was researching, I found out that there is a festival called Chaturthi in India, which is all devoted to Ganesh, and people will get these statues of Ganesh. They'll put them in their cars, in their houses, and all that sorts of things. But there is this ritual where they'll take a giant statue of Ganesh and dip him into the bay of Mumbai. It's meant to symbolize his return home to Kailash. So I didn't know that. before I depicted him sitting cross-legged in a body of water with his hand down like this with the waters parted in front of him because he represents unblocking, right? So my jaw dropped when I researched that and I saw that. I'm like, and I knew that I didn't know that before I painted him that way.
What a crazy coincidence.
Shut up, Chris. Shut up.
For me, I experienced a lot of synchronicity with my daughter's name. Her name is Alma, which means soul in Spanish. I, at that time, was thinking a lot about the soul and the soul's relationship to identity and what it really is, how it's, whether it's a ghost in this shell of a body or whether it's something deeper like the unity amongst multiplicity. Anyways, that name kept popping up in movies. I found out that my grandfather, who was adopted, his mother's name was Alma, and I never knew that.
Wow.
And that was like around the time we had kind of decided. One of our favorite shows, the main character, her name is Alma. It's a show called Undone. Really awesome show on Amazon Prime if you ever get a chance to check it out. But it popped up in a few other places too, but it just, everything about that name just resonated to where we just knew that was meant to be her name. There was no like, oh, are you sure you don't want it to be like... It was like my wife and I were just all in on that name. And it just had to do with so much synchronicity in that time of our lives. So...
my mom, growing up in Nebraska, she'd had 2 kids already, then I came around. And I don't know what made her do this, or she wanted my birth to be special somehow. And so there were a lot of things, like she, for one, wanted a more natural birth, so she refused some amount of anesthesia.
You've always been a pain.
And she asked for a crucifix, and she prayed that I would be born on a special day. So I came around on December 3rd, which was the same day as my grandmother's, her mom's, date of birth.
Wow.
So it was great. It was a little godsend. Synchronicity.
Wow.
Don't you love it?
So what does that mean? So we have synchronicities, and that's really cool. But do they mean anything?
I mean,
what do they mean in the passage of time?
It's hard to say objectively, like I said before, when you're talking about something like synchronicity or kairos. It's not something that you can materially prove to anyone. I liken it to like a sense of humor. If you tell a joke and some people really get it and they laugh, and then there's someone who doesn't really get it, and you're like, you even explain the joke, like, well, it's funny because of this, and they're like, oh, okay, and it doesn't hit the spot for them. And I think it's a lot like that when you're talking about things on this ethereal level, like synchronicity, or even stuff like prayer. When a lot of Christians, converts, when they come out of something like atheism and into Christianity, something about the worldview just brings a lot of synchronicity into their lives. And I think a lot of the Christian listeners might agree with me. They'll say, oh my gosh.
Oh, by the way, to your question earlier about the prayer life, and speaking of time as well, is something I love that Eckhart Tolle says, and he actually quotes Jesus on this as well, that when you're praying for something, pray like as if you already have it, like as if it's already here. If you're praying like, oh my God, like please help my grandpa, just out of desperation. If you're in desperation, you are by definition not fully in faith. Because if you were fully in faith and relaxed and, you knew, like, everything, whatever happens, it's for the best, right? Then you'd have a much more relaxed way of looking at it. You'd have ease, and you can be grieving, you can go through all these things, but still have rest and still have ease in your soul, But that's a really interesting way of looking at it. It goes back to that present moment and that activation in the present moment. Like, if you really, and Tony Robbins talks about this a lot too, like the, versus affirmations. I watched this video, he's talking about incantations, right? Like, speaking passionately with faith. Well, he uses the word belief, but now we can see, like, a distinction, like belief, you could believe but not fully know, right? There's a knowing in faith, right? There's a knowing in, whatever is going to happen, it happens the best way that it could, right? But faith, like, again, activating in that moment, like embodying that faith, embodying it in the present, right? Like, being and I hear this come a lot. There are some things I hear come up in, like, the manifestation community. I think there's a lot of nonsense, but there's a lot of really good sense as well, right? Like, embodying the type of person who would have that thing, that would have that manifestation. Like, say if you are trying to manifest. By the way, sorry listeners, I busted out the M word. Everybody's talking about it. but if you are embodying the type of person who would be in that position, then that's what would naturally happen. Like, the whole, the cream rises to the top sort of thing. We could even use an example of, like, Eminem, Dr. Dre, and him getting discovered. Like, he became the type of person who would be befitting to work with a person like Dr. Dre. And then he sent in that tape that landed to him, and he's like, holy shit, who's this guy? And he's like, and everybody around was like, oh, rap is like, he's a white guy and all that. He was like, dude, have you heard this motherfucker? Like kids got skills right now in the present moment, rose to the top, and suddenly that can change the entire trajectory of your life. Like, you could spend your whole entire life, like, he could spend his whole entire life in trailers in Detroit or wherever, but no, because of that, he changed his entire trajectory because of that, because he became that person. Right.
So in Hebrew, right, your faith is your sense of ta'af, which is a confluent relationship with God.
It's a knowing,
if we speak, right, our word is power, our word is thought and action. Speak into faith and embody the thing that you are in faith with.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes.
And also, you said you apologize for using the M word.
Oh,
manifest.
Manifest. Like, everybody's.
Okay.
It's
cult.
Everybody throwing around the word manifest, this and that, and I like to observe. I like to see how everyone's speaking and what makes sense, like what actually holds water, and like
there's definitely a lot of truth to it. Like, I like to think of it like this: if you took a person who was really healthy and really fit, and a person who was really unhealthy and lazy, and you switch their brains in their bodies, the healthy, fit person with the lazy brain would eventually go back to laziness. Mm-hmm. And the unhealthy body with the fit brain would be going to the gym and working off that stuff and doesn't want to feel that way. They would gravitate towards where they already are, in a sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, like that's
so
tremendous.
There's the idea of manifestation definitely has some weight to it, because if I, in my unhealthy body, have this mindset I'm going to already be this person. I'm already transformed from within. Mm-hmm. Your body will follow.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yes.
it's like you can take, say, along 2 timelines, right? Say this person is here. Say they're way further ahead than you, or somewhat further ahead, whatever. Mm-hmm. But you are on a really fast velocity, right? Say this person who doesn't have as much a sense of urgency. And this person is like sitting very comfortably, right? But you maintain a very fast pace, or you organize your life in such a way that you can that your velocity eventually can exceed that person, right? So when it's sustainable, right? And we've heard the story of like the tortoise and the hare growing up. Like you have the hare, it goes really, really, really fast, but maintains but eventually slows down, and then it gets so slow that the turtle eventually passes it out. But if you combine those 2 mindsets from earlier, where you can go really fast, but you know how to rejuvenate yourself. You know how to time your restfulness, so you're not stopping. You're pacing yourself, right? But you're training yourself to go very quickly, right? So you can go, it's like you can go fast when you need to, right? And this person, if they're even unaware of you, they don't even know how fast you're coming up, right?
Well, there's actually a very important spiritual lesson there, right? Like the rabbit was born with speed, he was born into a certain privilege, but he fell into a state of stasis in time. And the tortoise just keeps moving forward. And it's important to have a good, solidified, daily prayer routine, exercise routine, meditation routine that's consistent. Mm-hmm. Even if you have the talent, even if you are spiritually or mentally talented, if you're not in a good, steady routine, you're gonna get lost. You're gonna end up in a state of stasis. So you can.
It's true. Well
routine.
Put.
Breaking up your time into smaller increments. Or even mentally dividing your goals into different... Like, I like to think of it as I need to do something for my body, I need to do something for my mind, and I need to do something for my spirit. And if I think about those 3 things throughout the day, break it up in that sense, and break up my tasks across time into smaller increments, I find that I can accomplish my goals and attain them a lot easier. All right. I think in the interest of time, we might as well wrap it up. Okay. I think that was really great, guys. Thank you all for listening to the Telos Initiative and our podcast on time. Please like, comment, subscribe. Feel free to send us some money on Patreon, whatever you'd like to do, whatever makes you feel comfortable, and hope to hear from you guys again next time.
Yeah, it's all been a bunch of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You had to go there.
And it's been real.
You could even say that the more that we're supported, the more that we can invest our time into making quality podcasts.
Heck, yes.
Yes.
Time is money.
Time's money, you guys.
All right, thanks, guys.